My 7-year-old grandson grabbed my hand at his father's wedding and whispered words that made my blood run cold. When I looked under the table, I found a note that would expose a murder plot right in the middle of the celebration. What I did next destroyed the wedding, but it saved my grandson's life. I never thought I'd be the one to stop a wedding ceremony, especially not my own son's. But when you discover someone is trying to kill your grandchild, you don't hesitate. You act, and that's exactly what I did on that beautiful Florida afternoon when champagne glasses sparkled under crystal chandeliers and nobody suspected the nightmare unfolding beneath the white tablecloths before I tell you how it all unraveled. I need you to understand something about betrayal. It doesn't always announce itself with dramatic gestures or obvious cruelty. Sometimes it hides behind perfect smiles and wedding dresses that cost more than a car. Sometimes it sits right next to you at dinner, complimenting your cooking while plotting something unspeakable. I'm Betty Williams, and this is the story of how I learned that the most dangerous threats to our families don't always come from strangers. The ballroom glowed with the warm flicker of hundreds of candles, their light dancing across pristine white tablecloths and reflecting off polished silverware. I sat at table 8, right in the heart of the celebration, with my hand resting gently on my grandson Leo's shoulder. The boy was 7 years old, with clear blue eyes that reminded me so much of his mother that sometimes looking at him made my chest ache. He was pushing his favorite red toy car back and forth across the table, lost in his own quiet world while the adults around him laughed and clinked wine glasses. The jazz band played something soft and romantic, the kind of music that makes people sway in their seats and smile at nothing in particular. Waiters glided between tables like dancers, their trays balanced perfectly as they served appetizers and refilled champagne flutes. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt wrong. I watched my son Alex moving through the crowd, stopping at each table to shake hands and accept congratulations. He wore a navy blue suit that fit him perfectly, and his smile was broad and confident. He looked happier than I'd seen him in years, maybe since before Maria died. That should have made me happy too. It should have filled my heart with relief that he'd finally found joy again after so much grief. But every time I looked at his new bride, something cold and heavy settled in my stomach. Ava stood near the photographer's backdrop, posing with her bridesmaids. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of beaded silk that must have cost a fortune, and her dark hair was swept up in an elegant style that made her look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Her smile was dazzling, practiced to perfection. Too perfect, maybe, like something she'd rehearsed in the mirror until every angle was exactly right. She laughed at something one of her friends said, throwing her head back just enough to show off the diamond necklace at her throat, and I felt that strange tightness in my chest again. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself it was just the anxiety of watching my son marry someone new, someone who wasn't Maria. Maria had been gentle and warm, the kind of daughter-in-law who felt like a real daughter. When she died 3 years ago in that terrible accident on the highway, she took a piece of all of us with her. Alex had been devastated, barely functional for months. And little Leo, just 4 years old at the time, had stopped talking for weeks, his big eyes following me around the house like he was afraid I'd disappeared too. Time had passed since then. Wounds had scarred over, if not healed. Alex had thrown himself into work, building his company into something successful, and Leo had slowly come back to us, learning to laugh again, learning to play. And then Ava had appeared 6 months ago, sweeping into our lives with her confidence and her charm and her insistence on making everything better. At first, I'd wanted to like her. I really had. When Alex brought her home that first time, her arms full of expensive wine and a smile that could light up a room, I tried to open my heart. She'd complimented my cooking, asked about family photos on the wall, played with Leo's toy cars on the living room floor. She seemed interested, engaged, like she genuinely wanted to be part of our family. But there were moments, small ones, when I'd catch something in her expression. A flash of impatience when Leo took too long to answer a question. A tightness around her mouth when Alex mentioned Maria's name. The way her eyes would go cold and calculating for just a second. Before the warm smile snapped back into place, I'd mentioned my concerns to Alex once, carefully, not wanting to seem like the interfering mother-in-law. He'd brushed them off with a laugh. "You're just protective, Mom. That's natural." But Ava's been wonderful with Leo. She's been wonderful with all of us. "Don't you want me to be happy again?" Of course I wanted him to be happy. What kind of mother wouldn't? So I'd swallowed my doubts and told myself I was imagining things. I'd watched as the wedding planning progressed, as Ava's presence in our lives grew larger and more permanent. I'd watched Leo become quieter around her, more withdrawn. But I'd attributed it to the normal adjustment of a child learning to accept a new stepmother. Children need time, I told myself. He'll warm up to her eventually. Now, sitting in this beautiful ballroom surrounded by flowers and candlelight and the sound of people celebrating, I wondered if I'd been lying to myself all along. Leo's small voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Grandma?" He was looking up at me with those clear eyes, and there was something in them that made my heart skip. "Can we go home soon?" I smiled and stroked his hair, which I'd combed so carefully that morning. "We'll leave after dinner, sweetheart. Your daddy would be sad if we left before that." He nodded but didn't say anything else. His little fingers tightened around his toy car, and I noticed his other hand was pressed against his stomach like he felt sick. I frowned, leaning closer. "Are you feeling okay, baby? Does your tummy hurt?" Before he could answer, an elderly woman at our table leaned over with a warm smile. "Betty, that boy of yours is so well behaved." My grandchildren would be running wild at an event like this. I returned her smile automatically, my grandmother's pride kicking in despite my worry. "Leo's always been a good boy. Very thoughtful for his age. Takes after his grandmother. I'm sure," the woman's husband added with a wink. The conversation turned to other things while I kept one eye on Leo. He'd gone back to pushing his car, but the movement was mechanical, distracted. His gaze kept darting toward the other end of the ballroom where Ava was now talking to some of the groomsmen. Her laugh carrying across the space like wind chimes. My daughter Lucy appeared at my elbow, sliding into the empty chair beside me. Lucy wasn't my biological daughter. I'd adopted her 15 years ago after her parents died in a fire, but she was as much my child as Alex was. She wore a simple beige dress that complemented her warm brown hair, and her face was gentle as she leaned down to kiss Leo's forehead. "How's my favorite nephew doing?" she asked, her voice soft. Leo looked up at her and managed a small smile. Lucy had always been good with him, patient and kind in a way that reminded me of Maria. Since Maria's death, Lucy had stepped up without being asked, helping with Leo whenever Alex needed it, showing up with coloring books and homemade cookies, spending hours reading to him or playing in the backyard. She loved that boy like he was her own. "He says his stomach hurts," I told her quietly, Lucy's brow furrowed with concern. "Did you eat something that didn't agree with you, sweetie?" Leo shook his head. "I didn't eat anything yet." That should have reassured me, but somehow it didn't. The waiters were starting to bring out the appetizer course now. Elegant little plates with crackers, cheese spreads, and fresh shrimp arranged artfully with lemon wedges and cocktail sauce. The guest at the next table over was already reaching for one, exclaiming about how beautiful the presentation was. A waiter approached our table, setting down plates in front of each person. When he reached Leo, he set down a plate identical to all the others, crackers, cheese, and shrimp. I saw Leo's eyes widen slightly, and he pushed his chair back an inch, creating distance between himself and the plate. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, confused. "Don't you want to try the shrimp? I know you don't usually like it, but—" "No," Leo said quickly, his voice tight. "I don't want any." Lucy reached over and gently moved the plate away from him. "That's okay. You don't have to eat anything you don't want to. I'll get you some crackers and cheese without the shrimp." But Leo wasn't looking at his plate anymore. He was staring at something across the table, his face pale. I followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual, just the white tablecloth, the centerpiece of roses, the other guests chatting and eating. What was he seeing that I wasn't? The jazz band transitioned into a new song, something upbeat that had some of the younger guests standing up to dance. Alex and Ava were making their way toward the center of the ballroom, preparing for their first dance as husband and wife. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The perfect wedding for the perfect couple. Then Leo's small hand shot out and grabbed mine with surprising strength. "This perfect wedding, how you going?" His palm was cold, clammy with sweat. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I want to leave right now, please." My heart began to pound. There was real fear in his voice, the kind of fear that children shouldn't have to feel. "Leo, what is it?" "Tell Grandma what's wrong." He was shaking now, his whole body trembling like a leaf in a storm. His eyes were wide and fixed on something I couldn't see. "Grandma," he said again, his voice barely audible, even though I was leaning close enough to feel his breath on my cheek. "You didn't look under the table, did you?" Everything stopped. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all faded into background noise as those words echoed in my mind. "You didn't look under the table, did you?" Why would he ask that? What was under the table? Why was he so afraid? "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I tried to keep my voice calm, soothing, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "What's under the table?" Leo pressed his lips together and wouldn't answer, but his grip on my hand tightened until it almost hurt. I looked at Lucy, who was watching us with growing alarm. "I'm going to look," I said quietly. "It's okay, Leo. Grandma's just going to take a quick look." I lifted the edge of the white tablecloth with a hand that trembled more than I wanted to admit. The space beneath the table was dim, shadowy, full of chair legs and people's feet. I could see Leo's small shoes dangling above the floor, see the polished dress shoes of the elderly couple next to us, see the dark carpet with its elegant pattern. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing seemed wrong. Then I saw it, a small piece of paper, folded into a neat square, lying on the carpet right next to Leo's chair. It was so small, so innocuous that I almost missed it in the shadows. Just a scrap of white paper that someone had dropped, probably by accident. Nothing to be afraid of. Nothing that should make a 7-year-old boy shake with terror, but Leo was terrified. And that paper was directly beneath his seat, almost like it had been placed there deliberately, hidden where only a child playing with toys on the floor would notice it. I reached down and picked it up, my fingers clumsy with a dread I didn't understand yet. The paper was smooth, recently folded, not crumpled or dirty. Someone had written on it recently. Someone had put it there on purpose. Around me, the wedding celebration continued. People laughed and ate their appetizers. The jazz band played. Ava's voice rang out across the ballroom as she thanked someone for coming. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was rushed but legible, written in blue ink that had smudged slightly. 8 words. Just 8 simple words that made my blood turn to ice and my vision blur. Table 8, add shrimp to the child serving. I read it again, certain I'd misunderstood. Table 8, that was our table. The child was Leo, Add shrimp. Shrimp. The one food that could kill my grandson in minutes. If he ingested even a small amount, Leo had a severe, life-threatening shellfish allergy that we discovered when he was 3 years old and had nearly died from anaphylactic shock after eating a single bite of seafood. We carried EpiPens everywhere. We warned every restaurant, every school, every birthday party host. Everyone in our family knew about Leo's allergy. Everyone knew how dangerous it was, and someone had written a note instructing the kitchen staff to add shrimp to his food. My hands began to shake so badly I nearly dropped the paper. A wave of nausea rolled through me, and for a moment I thought I might vomit right there at the table. Someone had tried to poison my grandson. Someone had written this note and given it to a waiter, instructing them to add the one ingredient that could kill Leo at my son's wedding, in a room full of family and friends. Someone had planned this. I looked at Leo's plate, still sitting in front of him with its arrangement of shrimp. Had the waiter already followed these instructions? Was the shrimp on his plate already contaminated with shellfish residue? If Leo had touched it, if he'd put his fingers in his mouth afterward? Leo, I said, my voice coming out strangled and harsh. Did you touch anything on your plate? Did you eat anything at all? He shook his head quickly, his eyes wide with fear that mirrored my own. No, Grandma. I didn't touch it. I saw the shrimp, and I remembered Mommy telling me to never touch shrimp, so I didn't. Maria, even from beyond the grave, Maria was protecting her son. If she hadn't drilled that rule into him so thoroughly, if Leo hadn't remembered her warnings, he might have eaten something without thinking. He might have. I couldn't finish the thought. I stood up abruptly, not caring that I nearly knocked over my wine glass, not caring that the elderly couple next to me looked up in surprise. I pulled Leo against me, wrapping my arms around him so tightly he made a small sound of protest. But I couldn't let go. I couldn't loosen my grip even slightly because my grandson, my precious boy, had almost been murdered right in front of me. And I'd been sitting here smiling and making small talk while someone plotted to kill him. Betty, what's wrong? Lucy was on her feet too, her hand on my arm, concern written across her face. I couldn't speak. I couldn't make my mouth form words. I just held out the paper to her with a shaking hand. Lucy took it, read it, and went completely white. Her eyes darted to Leo's plate, then to Leo himself, then back to me. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God, who would... I don't know. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. But I'm going to find out. The elderly couple was staring at us now, confused and alarmed. Other people at nearby tables were starting to notice the commotion. I could feel eyes turning toward us, could hear the whispers starting to spread. But I didn't care about any of that. Let them stare. Let them whisper. My grandson was alive, and someone had tried to change that. I looked across the ballroom and found Ava standing near the dance floor, her head thrown back in laughter at something one of the groomsmen had said. She looked radiant, carefree, like she didn't have a worry in the world. Like she wasn't the new stepmother to a 7-year-old boy with a life-threatening allergy. Like she hadn't just been in the perfect position to know exactly which table Leo would be sitting at, exactly which waiter would be serving our table, exactly how to slip a note to someone without being noticed in the chaos of wedding preparations. My vision narrowed until all I could see was her. The beautiful bride, the woman my son loved, the woman who had smiled at me across my dinner table and complimented my cooking and played with Leo's toy cars. The woman who might have just tried to murder my grandson. I clutched the paper in my fist and started walking toward the cluster of waiters near the bar. Lucy grabbed my arm. Betty, wait. Think about this. We need to be careful. Careful? I turned to her, and I knew my expression must have been frightening because she took a step back. Someone just tried to kill Leo. I'm done being careful. The waiters were gathered in a small group, laughing quietly among themselves during a brief lull in service. They were young men, probably college students working the wedding for extra cash, and they looked up in surprise when I approached them like an avenging angel with a crumpled piece of paper in my hand. "Which one of you received this?" I demanded, holding up the note. They exchanged confused glances. One of them, a tall kid with dark hair and kind eyes, stepped forward. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't understand. This note." I thrust it at him, my hand shaking. "Someone gave you this note with instructions about Table 8? Which one of you was it?" Recognition flickered across his face. "Oh, that. Yeah, that was me. I'm David. I was supposed to give that to the chef, but I guess I dropped it when I was bringing out the appetizers." "I'm really sorry, ma'am. Did it cause some kind of problem?" "Did it cause a problem?" I laughed, and the sound was slightly hysterical even to my own ears. "This note instructed you to add shrimp to my grandson's food." My grandson, who is deathly allergic to shellfish. If he'd eaten that food, he could have died. David's face went from confused to horrified in the span of a heartbeat. "What?" "No, I swear I didn't know. The note didn't say anything about allergies. I would never. I'm not blaming you," I said, forcing myself to take a breath to stay calm. "But I need to know who gave you this note." "Who handed it to you?" David shook his head, clearly rattled. "It was one of the guests. A woman. She said she was passing along a message from the bride's family about a special dietary request for one of the tables. She seemed really nice about it, very polite." "I didn't think. What did she look like?" I don't know. Dark hair, I think. Maybe in her 20s or 30s. I didn't really pay that much attention. We were busy, and she just handed me the note and walked away." "Dark hair. 20s or 30s. That description could fit half the women at this wedding." But my gaze drifted back to Ava, still holding court near the dance floor, and then slid past her to a younger woman standing slightly behind her. Ava's sister, Gloria, only 18 years old, dressed in a rose-colored bridesmaid dress, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the older wedding guests. Gloria had dark hair. Gloria was young enough to be nervous around authority figures, compliant enough to follow orders from her older sister without asking too many questions. Gloria had been helping Ava with wedding preparations all week, running errands, passing along messages, doing whatever her sister asked. I walked across the ballroom with Lucy and Leo trailing behind me. People moved out of my way, sensing something was wrong, their festive expressions melting into concern as they watched me approach the bridal party. Ava saw me coming, and her smile faltered just slightly before snapping back into place. "Betty," she called out, her voice bright and cheerful. "Isn't this wonderful? I'm so glad you and Leo could be here to celebrate with us." I didn't return her smile. I walked right up to her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly to meet my eyes, and I held up the note. "Explain this," I said quietly. Ava's eyes dropped to the paper, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, fear, recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by confusion that looked too practiced to be genuine. "I don't understand," she said, her voice perfectly modulated, perfectly innocent. "What is that?" "This," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to keep it steady, "is a note instructing the waitstaff to add shrimp to Leo's food. Leo, who is deathly allergic to shellfish. Leo, whose allergy you know about because we've discussed it multiple times." The conversation around us had stopped. People were turning to stare now, their faces painted with shock and confusion. I saw Alex pushing through the crowd, his expression alarmed. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, reaching us and looking between me and his new bride. "Why are you making a scene?" "Ask your wife," I said, never taking my eyes off Ava. Ask her why there's a note instructing the kitchen to poison your son. The word poison hung in the air like a curse. Someone gasped. Alex's face went white. What are you talking about? That's insane. Let's read it yourself. I shoved the paper at him. Alex took it with trembling hands and read the words written there. I watched the color drain from his face, watched his expression shift from disbelief to horror. Table 8. Add shrimp to the child's serving. He looked up at Ava. What is this? Where did this come from? I have no idea, Ava said, and her voice was still steady, still calm, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. Anyone could have written that. There's no name on it, no indication of who it came from. Daddy, I understand you're protective of Leo, but you can't seriously think I had anything to do with this. The waiter said a woman gave it to him, I countered. A woman who claimed to be passing along a message from your family? That's impossible, Ava said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. Why would anyone in my family? Because someone wanted to hurt Leo? Lucy's voice cut through the tension like a knife. She'd been silent until now, standing behind me with one protective hand on Leo's shoulder. But she stepped forward and faced Ava directly. Someone who knew about his allergy. Someone who had access to the wedding planning, who could slip instructions to the waitstaff without raising suspicion. Someone who might benefit from Leo being out of the picture. That's a terrible accusation, Ava said, but her mask was cracking now. I could see the anger underneath, the resentment she'd been hiding so carefully. You've always had it out for me, Lucy. You've been in love with Alex for years, and you can't stand that he chose someone else. This is just a pathetic attempt to ruin our wedding. The words hit Lucy like a physical blow. Her face flushed red, and I saw tears spring to her eyes, but she didn't back down. This isn't about me, she said, her voice shaking. This is about a 7-year-old boy who almost died because of your jealousy and your cruelty. I didn't do anything. Ava's voice rose to a shout. You're all crazy. This whole family is. The cameras will show the truth, Lucy interrupted. The ballroom has security cameras covering every angle. If you're innocent, the footage will prove it. We can check right now to see who gave that note to the waiter. The threat hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Ava's face went ashen. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. And in that moment of hesitation, I knew. I knew with absolute certainty that she was guilty. Gloria, Ava said suddenly, desperately, turning to her younger sister. Tell them. Tell them I didn't do anything. But Gloria was crying, her face crumpled with guilt and fear. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry, Ava. I can't lie about this. You gave me the note. You told me to give it to the waiter and not tell anyone. You said it was just a dietary request that Leo liked shrimp and you wanted to surprise him. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know he was allergic. The confession shattered what was left of Ava's composure. She lunged at her sister, fury transforming her beautiful face into something ugly and twisted. You stupid little brat. I told you to keep your mouth shut. Alex caught her arm, pulling her back with a look of such betrayal and horror that it broke my heart. You tried to kill my son, he said, his voice hollow with shock. At our wedding, you tried to murder Leo. He's in the way, Ava spat. All pretense of innocence gone now. Her carefully constructed mask had shattered, revealing the rage and jealousy underneath. You're always worried about Leo, always putting him first, always talking about his dead mother like she was some kind of saint. I'm your wife, and I'll always be second to a ghost and a child who isn't even mine. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the jazz band had stopped playing. Every eye in the ballroom was fixed on Ava, watching as she destroyed herself with her own words. You're sick, Alex said finally, his voice breaking. You're sick and you're cruel and you're never going to be anywhere near my son again. Security was approaching now, alerted by the commotion. Two men in dark suits moved through the crowd, their expressions professional and detached. "Ma'am," one of them said to Ava, "we're going to have to ask you to leave the premises." "This is my wedding," Ava shrieked, struggling against Alex's grip. "You can't throw me out of my own wedding." "It's not your wedding anymore," I said quietly. "It's the day you tried to murder a child. And I promise you, Ava, you will pay for what you attempted to do." They escorted her out, still screaming and cursing, her beautiful wedding dress trailing behind her like a discarded dream. Gloria followed in tears, apologizing over and over to anyone who would listen. The guests stood in shocked silence, their champagne glasses forgotten, their celebratory mood shattered beyond repair. Alex sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Lucy sat beside him, her hand on his back, offering comfort without words. And I held Leo close, feeling his small heart beating against my chest, grateful beyond measure that he was alive, that Maria's warnings had saved him, that we'd discovered the plot before it was too late. The perfect wedding had turned into a nightmare, but Leo was safe. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The days after the wedding felt like walking through fog. The house was too quiet, filled with heavy silences and questions no one wanted to ask out loud. Alex moved through the rooms like a ghost, his face drawn and exhausted, the weight of betrayal aging him years overnight. He'd canceled the honeymoon, of course. There was no honeymoon to go on, no marriage to celebrate. Just the wreckage of what he'd thought was love and the terrible knowledge that he'd almost lost his son. I watched him take Leo to school each morning, holding the boy's hand a little too tightly, checking and rechecking his EpiPen, speaking quietly with the teacher about security and who was allowed to pick Leo up. The trust had been shattered, and I knew it would take a long time to rebuild. Leo was quieter than usual, more clingy. He stayed close to me whenever I was in the room, his small hand finding mine at random moments, like he needed to reassure himself I was still there. At night, I'd hear him crying softly in his bedroom, and I'd go to him and rock him like I had when he was a baby, singing the same lullabies Maria used to sing. "Grandma," he asked me one night, his face pressed against my shoulder, "why did Miss Ava want to hurt me?" How do you explain evil to a 7-year-old? How do you make sense of something that doesn't make sense even to adults? Some people are sick in their hearts, I told him gently, stroking his hair. They want things they can't have, and it makes them do terrible things. But you're safe now, baby. Grandma won't let anyone hurt you ever again. He nodded against my shoulder, trusting me completely with a faith I prayed I'd never betray. "I miss Mommy," he whispered. "I know, sweetheart. I miss her too." Lissy became Leo's constant companion after that. She'd show up every morning with lunch she'd packed herself, carefully labeled and sealed, with a note for the teacher explaining Leo's allergy in detail. She'd spend afternoons at the park with him, pushing him on the swings, teaching him to climb the jungle gym, sitting with him on the bench when he got tired, and telling him stories about his mother. "Your mommy was the bravest person I knew," she'd tell him. "When you were born, she was so scared, but she held you in her arms and I saw her face change. She looked at you and she wasn't scared anymore. She was ready to fight the whole world to keep you safe." Leo would listen with wide eyes, drinking, and every detail about the mother he was starting to forget. And I'd watch Lucy with him, seeing the love and patience in every gesture, and I'd think about all the ways she'd been there for our family, all the times she'd stepped up without being asked. One evening, after Leo had fallen asleep, I found Alex standing in the kitchen, staring at nothing. Lucy was washing dishes at the sink, and the domestic scene was so normal, so peaceful, that it hurt. "I was blind," Alex said suddenly. All the signs were there. The way Leo shrank away from her, The way she'd get irritated when I talked about Maria, her jealousy of Lucy. I saw it all and I ignored it because I wanted to believe I could have a normal family again. Lucy turned off the water and dried her hands. You're not psychic, Alex. You couldn't have known she was capable of something like this. I should have trusted my gut. I should have listened to Mom when she tried to warn me. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. You knew something was wrong. Why didn't I listen? Because you're human, I said softly. Because you wanted to be happy again. Because you thought Leo needed a mother figure in his life. You can't blame yourself for that, but I almost lost him. His voice broke. I almost lost my son because I was too stupid and selfish to see what was right in front of me. Lucy crossed the kitchen and put her arms around him. For a moment, he stiffened, surprised, and then he collapsed against her, sobbing like a child. She held him and stroked his hair, murmuring soothing words. And I saw the way she looked at him with love, yes, but also with patience and understanding and a gentleness that couldn't be faked. Ava had been right about one thing. Lucy did love Alex. She'd loved him for years. Quietly and without expectation, never pushing, never demanding. Just being there whenever he needed her. And now, watching them together, I wondered if maybe Alex was finally seeing what had been in front of him all along. The weeks passed. Ava was charged with attempted murder, a fact that made headlines in the local papers and sent shockwaves through our community. Her expensive lawyer argued that the note was taken out of context, that she'd never intended actual harm, but the evidence was damning. Gloria's testimony, the waiter's confirmation, the security footage showing Ava handing her sister the note, it all painted a clear picture of premeditated malice. I didn't attend the hearings. I couldn't bear to see her face again, to hear her excuses. But I read the reports and felt a grim satisfaction when the judge denied bail, citing the severity of the crime and the danger Ava posed to a minor child. She would go to prison, Alex told me after one of the hearings. The prosecutor says she's looking at 10 to 15 years. Good, I said simply. Some people might have thought I was heartless, but I couldn't find it in myself to feel sorry for her. She tried to kill my grandson. As far as I was concerned, 10 to 15 years wasn't nearly enough. Lucy continued to be a constant presence in our lives. She'd moved into Maria's old sewing room, the one Alex had kept locked for 3 years because he couldn't bear to sort through her things. Together, Lucy and I went through the boxes of fabric and patterns, the photos and journals, keeping the important memories and letting go of the rest. Maria would have liked you, I told Lucy one afternoon as we folded quilts Maria had made. She would have trusted you with her son. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. I hope so. I've tried to honor her memory, to be someone Leo can count on. You've been more than that, I said, taking her hand. You've been exactly what this family needed. 3 months after the wedding that never was, Alex came to me with an unusual request. Mom, I want to talk to you about something. About Lucy. I've been expecting this conversation for weeks. What about her? I think, he paused, gathering his thoughts. I think I've been in love with her for a long time and I was too stupid to realize it. Or maybe I realized it and I was too scared to admit it because I thought it would be betraying Maria's memory. Maria's been gone for 3 years, son. She'd want you to be happy. She'd want Leo to have someone who loves him the way Lucy does. I know. He rubbed his face with both hands. But I don't want to rush into anything. I don't want to make another mistake. What if I'm wrong about her too? What if Lucy isn't Ava? I said firmly. Lucy has been part of this family for 15 years. You know her heart. You know her character. And more importantly, Leo knows her. He trusts her. He loves her. He asked me yesterday if Lucy could be his new mommy, Alex said quietly. Just came right out and said it at breakfast. Daddy, can Aunt Lucy be my mommy now? I smiled despite the tears that pricked my eyes. And what did you tell him? I told him I'd have to ask Lucy how she felt about that. And then I realized I was terrified of her answer. What if she doesn't want me? What if she's been waiting all this time, and now I've ruined it by marrying someone else first? What if Alex? I put my hand on his arm. Stop spiraling. Talk to her. Be honest. Tell her how you feel. Lucy isn't going anywhere. He nodded, took a deep breath, and went to find her. I watched through the kitchen window as he approached. Lucy in the backyard where she was pushing Leo on the swing. I saw him pull her aside, saw the serious conversation that followed, saw the moment her face transformed with joy and disbelief. I saw her nod, saw Alex pull her into his arms, saw Leo run over and hug them both, jumping up and down with excitement, and I stood at that window with tears running down my face, thanking Maria for sending us Lucy, thanking God for protecting Leo, thanking whatever force in the universe had prevented the worst from happening and given our broken family a chance to heal. 6 months later, Alex and Lucy were married in a small ceremony in our backyard, just family and close friends. No ballroom, no jazz band, no elaborate decorations. Just the people who mattered most gathered under the old oak tree where Alex used to play as a child. Lucy wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers from the garden. Leo stood between them as they exchanged vows, his hand in each of theirs. Officially making them a family, I stood off to the side and watched my son marry the woman who had always been meant for him, the woman who loved his child like her own, the woman who had proved her loyalty and her character in 100 small ways over 15 years. This was what a wedding should be, not a performance or a display of wealth, but a genuine celebration of love and commitment and family. During the reception, Leo tugged on my sleeve. Grandma, are you happy? I looked at his bright, clear eyes, free of the fear that had haunted them for months. I looked at Alex and Lucy dancing together, his head bent to hear something she was saying, both of them laughing. I looked at the family gathered around us, the people who had stood by us through tragedy and betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. Yes, my love, I said, pulling him into a hug. I'm very happy. Life didn't return to normal after that because normal had changed. We were different people now, marked by what we'd been through, more cautious and more grateful in equal measure. But we were also stronger, more aware of what really mattered, more protective of the bonds we'd formed. Lucy officially adopted Leo a year after the wedding. She'd been functioning as his mother in every way that counted, but the legal recognition meant everything to all of them. The day the adoption was finalized, Leo came home from court with a new birth certificate that listed Lucy as his mother, and he showed it to everyone with such pride that it made my heart ache in the best way. I have 2 mommies now, he told his teacher the next day. My first mommy is in heaven watching over me, and my new mommy is here taking care of me. I'm very lucky. Yes, I thought when he told me about it. Yes, your daughter Ava was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison for attempted murder and endangering the welfare of a child. I didn't attend the sentencing. I had no desire to see her again, no interest in her excuses or her apologies. She tried to kill my grandson, and as far as I was concerned, she'd earned every day of that sentence. Gloria, her sister, reached out to me once through a letter. She apologized profusely, explained that she'd been manipulated and controlled by Ava her whole life, said she was in therapy trying to understand how she'd been complicit in something so terrible. I wrote back with a brief note accepting her apology but making it clear we wouldn't be pursuing a relationship. She was young and she'd been used, but she'd still played a role in nearly killing Leo, and I couldn't find it in my heart to forgive that completely. Some wounds heal. Others leave scars. The trick is learning to live with both. Leo grew up healthy and happy, surrounded by people who loved him. He excelled in school, made friends easily, developed a passion for building things with his hands, just like his grandfather had. He still played with toy cars, though he'd moved on to more sophisticated models as he got older. And he still remembered his first mother, thanks to the stories we told him and the photos we kept displayed around the house. "Tell me about when Mommy Maria taught me to tie my shoes," he'd ask sometimes. And I'd tell him again about Maria's patience, the way she'd sat with him for hours with those little practice boards, never getting frustrated, always encouraging. "She loved you so much," I'd finish. "And she'd be so proud of the boy you're becoming." "I know," he'd say with confidence. "Mommy Lucy tells me that too. She says Mommy Maria is proud of all of us." Lucy never tried to erase Maria's memory or compete with a ghost. She honored Maria's place in Leo's life while creating her own relationship with him. And that grace and wisdom was exactly why she was the right person for our family dog. As for me, I watched my family grow and change and heal. And I counted my blessings every single day. I'd come so close to losing Leo, so close to watching my son make a terrible mistake that would have cost him everything. But we'd been given a second chance, and we weren't going to waste it. Sometimes late at night, I'd think about that moment in the ballroom when Leo grabbed my hand and whispered those words that changed everything. "You didn't look under the table, did you?" Such a simple question from a frightened child, but it had saved his life. If he hadn't been playing with his toy car, if it hadn't rolled under the table, if he hadn't seen that note, but he had. And I had. And we'd acted in time. I thought about all the other grandmothers out there, all the other families dealing with step-parents and blended families and the complicated dynamics that come with second marriages. I thought about the warning signs I'd ignored, the red flags I'd explained away because I wanted my son to be happy. "Trust your instincts," I wanted to tell them. "If something feels wrong, investigate. If a child seems afraid, listen. Don't brush off concerns because you don't want to cause trouble or seem like you're interfering. Sometimes causing trouble is exactly what you need to do to keep a child safe." Leo was 14 now, nearly as tall as Alex, with his mother Maria's blue eyes and his father's determined chin. He'd survived not just the allergy attack that never happened, but also the psychological trauma of knowing someone had wanted to hurt him. With therapy and love and time, he'd healed. The nightmares had faded. The fear had loosened its grip. One evening, he asked me about that day at the wedding. We didn't talk about it often. It was too painful, too frightening, but sometimes he needed to revisit it to make sense of what had happened. "Grandma, do you think Miss Ava was always bad, or did something make her that way?" I considered the question carefully. "I think people are complicated, Leo. Ava was jealous and insecure, and instead of dealing with those feelings in healthy ways, she let them turn into something dark and dangerous. She made choices, terrible choices, and she has to live with the consequences. Do you think she's sorry?" "I don't know, honey. Maybe she is now. Maybe prison has given her time to think about what she did and regret it. But even if she is sorry, it doesn't change what she tried to do. Some things can't be forgiven, even with an apology." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad you found that note, Grandma. I'm glad I saw it under the table." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." He hugged me then, this teenage boy who was almost too big for hugs but still needed them sometimes. And I held him tight and thanked whatever guardian angels had been watching over us that day. Years passed. Alex and Lucy had a daughter, Leo's little sister Emma, who came into the world with Lucy's warm brown eyes and a smile that could light up a room. Leo adored her, was protective and patient in a way that showed he'd learned something important about love and family from all we'd been through. I grew older. My hair completely gray now, my hands marked with age spots and arthritis. But I was still there, still watching over my family, still counting my blessings every single day that Leo was alive and healthy and loved. Sometimes I'd see Lucy and Leo in the kitchen together, making cookies or preparing dinner, and I'd think about Maria. I'd wonder if she was watching from wherever she was, if she could see how well Lucy was loving her son, how completely she'd stepped into the role of mother without trying to replace the irreplaceable. "Thank you," I'd whisper to Maria's memory. "Thank you for teaching Leo to be afraid of shrimp. Thank you for loving him so much that your warning saved his life even after you were gone." And I'd feel, in some indefinable way, that Maria was there with us, that her love had never really left, that it lived on in Leo's smile and his kindness, and the way he looked after his little sister with such care. This is what I learned from those terrible events. Evil exists, sometimes in the most unexpected places. But love is stronger. Family, real family, the kind built on loyalty and sacrifice and genuine care, is stronger. And a grandmother's instinct, honed over decades of loving and protecting her children and grandchildren, is something to be trusted and honored. I learned to speak up when something felt wrong, even if it made me unpopular. I learned that keeping the peace isn't worth it if someone is in danger. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is cause a scene, make accusations, demand answers, even if it destroys something that looked perfect on the surface, because Leo's life was worth more than a perfect wedding. His safety was worth more than my son's temporary happiness with the wrong woman. And the truth, however ugly and painful, was worth more than comfortable lies taught if I could give advice to other grandmothers, other mothers, other family members watching their loved ones enter new relationships. It would be this: trust your gut. Watch the children. Listen when they tell you in words or actions that something is wrong. Don't be afraid to be the villain in someone else's story if it means being the hero in a child's life. I was willing to be seen as the interfering, paranoid old woman who ruined her son's wedding. I was willing to cause a scene, to make accusations, to destroy Ava's facade in front of hundreds of guests. Because Leo's life was on the line and nothing else mattered. Looking back now, I don't regret a single moment of it. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. I'd stand up in that ballroom 1,000 times over if it meant keeping my grandson safe. The wedding was destroyed, but the family was saved. Ava went to prison, but Leo lived to grow up and thrive. The perfect facade crumbled, but the truth set us free to build something real and lasting. That's what matters in the end. Not the appearance of happiness, but actual happiness. Not the perfect wedding with the beautiful bride and the expensive dress, but the real marriage with the right partner and genuine love. Not protecting the feelings of adults who should know better, but protecting the children who depend on us to keep them safe. Leo is 21 now as I write this, a senior in college studying architecture. He still comes home every weekend to have dinner with us, still brings his toy cars to show Emma, now 7, how to race them across the living room floor. He has Maria's kindness and Lucy's patience and Alex's determination. And he's grown into exactly the kind of man we all hoped he'd become. Sometimes when I watch him laugh at something Emma says, or see him help Lucy in the kitchen, or observe the easy affection between him and Alex, I think about that alternate timeline. The one where I didn't look under the table. The one where Leo ate that contaminated food. The one where the EpiPen didn't work fast enough and we lost him in that beautiful ballroom, surrounded by flowers and candlelight. That timeline haunts me sometimes in the dark hours of early morning. But then the sun rises and I hear Leo's voice calling Grandma as he comes through the door, and I know that we're living in the right timeline. The one where vigilance and love and a grandmother's fierce. Protectiveness saved a child's life, the one where the family survived. If you're reading this story, if you're hearing these words, please remember your instincts matter. Your concerns are valid. When something feels wrong, especially when children are involved, investigate. Ask questions. Demand answers. Don't be silenced by social pressure or the fear of causing trouble, because sometimes causing trouble is the most important thing you can do. Sometimes destroying a wedding saves a life, and that's a trade I'd make every single time.